Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage.
Freshly printed paper, the wonderful smell of wet ink. Smell it, Jimmy.
Where did you find it, in the dumpster?
What? That's my paper.
Well, okay. The important thing is the content. Let me have a look. Buddy, what is this?
What's what?
It's only silly jokes, half-baked punchlines, and mean-spirited yelling!
Well, who do you think wrote this silly intro?
Get out.
Que meu pai?
Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage.
And I'm Deniz, the Buddymeister.
And today we are going to continue our journey through the work of legendary director Satyajit Ray with what supposedly is his favorite of his own films, 1964's Charulata.
Charulata was Satyajit Ray's 12th film as a director, including a short 1-hour documentary about the poet, musician, artist, universal genius Rabindranath Tagore, who also wrote a novella on which Charulata was based on.
Charulata is a masterclass when it comes to subtle storytelling and the exploration of human relationships, but also when it comes to adaptations. It is based on Tagore's novella Nastanir, which can be translated to The Broken Nest. And while Ray's film is titled Charulata, he actually ends it with the title Nastanir appearing on screen.
In contemporary reviews, Ray was very heavily criticized by a lot of critics because Tagore had or still has an exceptional status as an artist, and Ray took a lot of freedoms in adapting his story. He was criticized to such a degree that he wrote a lengthy defense in which he lays out his understanding of the cinematic form and what it means to adapt something for the screen.
It's an understanding that I share very much. Ray, who started his career by adapting the novel Pater Panchali, knew that telling a pre-existing story for the cinema is more than just sticking to specific words. You have to find a form that's deserving of this other medium, the medium of film.
And Charulata is both a beautiful film told through the means of cinema as well as a fascinating exploration of the written word, of poetry, books, handwriting, bringing your experiences and perspectives to paper.
It even begins with the alphabet, with the letter B. The Charulata, a young housewife in the late 19th century, played by Madhabi Mukherjee, is knitting on a handkerchief. The letter B stands for her husband Bubati. After she is done and the opening credits are over, she is roaming through the big house and taking up a book, because one of her defining characteristics is her passion for literature.
A passion that her husband doesn't really share, and the basic story of the movie revolves around her growing relationship and affection for her visiting cousin-in-law Amal, played by the great Sumitra Chatterjee, a young prospective writer who shares her love for literature.
Another important aspect the very first minutes of the movie already lay out for us is this contrast of inside and outside. Charu's lonely domestic life inside the big house and the world out there, which she's only secretly observing from behind the windows. The movie is also known in English as The Lonely Wife, and the German title was Charulata, die einsame Frau, The Lonely Woman.
The story takes place in 1879, and though it's still quite common in many regions of the world today that the woman stays at home, back then it was the norm. Every day was pretty much the same, and you can sense Charu's loneliness and her boredom.
Now, is it a very slow film? Absolutely, but I would really urge everybody who hasn't seen it yet to take the time to let yourself get absorbed by its intimate story and its beautiful and meticulous presentation, to let yourself fall into its period setting and its lyrical atmosphere.
A review in the New York Times said that the film moved like a majestic snail, as do all Ray films, which is a great way to describe his style of filmmaking.
Madhabi Mukherjee, who we've seen before in another one of Ray's masterpieces, The Big City, is absolutely gorgeous in this role. And I'm always a bit hesitant to say this, but she's also drop dead beautiful, which plays into this depiction of the beautiful housewife that's almost like another picturesque furnishing piece in this big house.
Yet her husband Bupati, played by Shailene Mukherjee, isn't portrayed like a tyrant or neglecting husband at all. Maybe to a small degree because he simply can't share the passions of his wife, but not because of some mean-spirited nature, but simply because that's not how he's built.
I was immensely happy about the fact that he's not the villain of this story, and herein lies one of the film's undeniable strengths. Its characters are real and complex, and the two men in Charu's life are not posed against each other in a simple black and white fashion. Bhupati is portrayed as a warm and passionate man as well, and he tries to encourage his wife where he can, yet he's not the one that's able to really reach through to her heart.
When Amal enters the film, he doesn't simply arrive at the door, he is coming in like a literal thunderstorm that will sweep Charu off her feet and change her life completely. It's a storm so strong that it doesn't only affect the outside, but it enters the house as well, and therefore Charu's world. Now, I personally thought that this image of the thunderstorm is a bit bland, but it of course makes sense.
I think it's beautiful because it breaks the mundane, silent monotony of the household perfectly. And then the very first thing Amal is saying to Charu already revolves around literature, foreshadowing how much he will be the one who speaks to her heart and soul. And jumping to the very end for a second, it's also again a storm that lets Charu get overwhelmed by her emotions. And Sumitra Chatterjee is fantastic as Amal. He is this young, ambitious and quite frankly wonderfully goofy guy with a quirky kind of humor and just a big heart.
I liked him too, but I have to say that I thought that the character of Amal felt a bit worn out for me. I thought he was your typical artist who stirs up the world of the establishment by doing what he wants and loves to do. In Charulata it works just fine because, as you said, Bhupati is not his enemy and all the characters interact in a very playful and natural manner. But I had a general problem to empathize with these characters. They didn't give me enough.
I respect your opinion, I really do, but I think you're totally wrong. Charulata is giving us great characters and it unfolds its story with so much subtlety. It doesn't need to speak out all of the big emotions and yet you absolutely know what is going on. And it happens so naturally that it's totally believable and you wonder yourself when it all happened. The acting and direction are flawless and the filmmaking is once again beautifully sophisticated.
Well, you've watched the movie a second time for this review. I've only seen it once. I might feel different when I watch it again. To be honest, I'm quite surprised myself that I haven't felt that much.
Take the scene where Charu is giving the handkerchief to his husband, for example. She promises to embroider his slippers next, but then she is giving the slippers to Amal. Again, without saying stuff like I love you, everything is clear through the language of cinema.
I do not doubt Satyajit Ray's firm knowledge of the language of cinema, and looking at that specific scene like that makes total sense. In my mind, I was probably comparing it to Apur Sansar and the big city the whole time, and that might have disrupted my experience with it. But then again, I just can't stop something like that from happening, so maybe I just didn't like Charulata as much as those movies.
And you have every right for that. But maybe you actually should watch it a second time. I certainly did not understand everything either. There are quite a few literal references and of course there's always cultural stuff that we won't grasp completely or whose significance we can't completely understand. But the human emotions are so universal and their depiction so tender that it doesn't really matter at all.
Well said, and it's not like Charulata doesn't have so much more to offer. It's needless to say, but this is a beautiful film. The cinematography was once again done by Subrata Mitra and the editing by Dulal Dutta. Together with Ray, they're one of cinema's dream teams.
And the score was composed by Ray himself and it's exceptional.
That main theme that we hear in the opening credits is wonderful. Another piece of music that stood out can be heard in the scene when Charulata decides to finally write a story and we see a dissolve of her face and the things she thinks about. Pretty remarkable.
It's another masterpiece by the master.
Okay, what would we say in German about Charulata?
Charulata ist ein weiteres Meisterwerk von Satyajit Ray. Wie immer wunderschön anzusehen, ist es hier aber vor allem die sorgfältige und subtile Erforschung von menschlichen Beziehungen, die hervorsticht. Und natürlich die wunderschöne Madhabi Mukherjee. I give Charulata 9 out of 10. It's more like 8.9, but I don't do that.
For me, it's 8 out of 10. It's more like 7.9, but I don't do that either.
আমি চিনি গো চিনি তোমারে ও বউ ঠাকুরানী.
Did you know that The Darjeeling Limited and Moonrise Kingdom, both directed by Wes Anderson, have a connection with Charulata?
No, what connection?
Parts of Charulata's score were used in The Darjeeling Limited, and in Moonrise Kingdom the character of Susie has binoculars in a few scenes, and those scenes were shot like the ones in Charulata.
Interesting. So what are your thoughts about Charulata? Leave a comment and hit me up on Twitter, Instagram and Letterboxd, and now also on Patreon simply at The Jimmy Cage.
And you can hit me up on Twitter at the Buddymeister.
And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like. And make sure you hit that bell for all we have to tell.